There's 3 games I've loved from the early days of the Sega Genesis: Phantasy Star 2, Herzog Zwei, and what I feel to be the most underrated game on the console, Sword of Vermilion. I'm honestly surprised this game doesn't get as much love as some of the other Genesis games out there. It's an ambitious action RPG with a really fun story that I think deserves a lot more credit than it gets. The game came out in North America in 1990, which was almost 35 years ago. I'm going to dive into what I enjoyed about the narrative, so just a warning, there will be story spoilers. On the surface, the game seems like a traditional fantasy game. King Eric of Excalibria gets attacked by Sarkhan of Carthagena and is defeated. Right before his death, King Eric orders his best warrior, Blade, to escape with his son. 18 years later, Blade dies of old age but tells you the truth about your past. Now you have to go out and gather the 16 rings of good and evil so you can defeat Sarkhan. What made me fall in love with the story is how it plays with a lot of fantasy tropes in quirky ways. I always found myself wanting to reach the next town since each had a unique problem. Like in the city of Watling, everyone has turned old. No one remembers anything, including the innkeeper who can't recall how much staying overnight cost and lets you stay for free. Finally, a 24-year-old who's also turned old tells you that an archdemon in Verlin's cave stole everyone's youth. You have to track the stone demon in the cave, take him down, and return everyone back to their normal age. As an amusing coda to the quest, the innkeeper, recalling your free stay, now charges for back pay for the times you stay for free. In the village of Helwig, all the men have been kidnapped by the Carthagena army, so they can be used as a mining labor force. Only the women have been left behind, so you have to go and rescue them from Methuen's cave where they've been working. I really liked how the story showed the insidious nature of evil. Carthagena wasn't just some vague force threatening General Doom, but they were directly targeting what was precious to these people: youth and family. As a kid used to cartoony villains, I enjoyed how each town got its own challenge that I had to then help overcome. My favorite part here is an optional side quest where you can play matchmaker. A lonely old man in Keltwood asks if you can hook him up with someone. If you take a sketch of an old woman from Helwig back to him and vice versa, they end up getting together. She gives you the dragon shield as a reward, which is the most powerful shield in the game. A nice reward for helping 2 people find love. There's also a fun nod connecting Sword of Vermilion to the Phantasy Star series in a town called Parma, which was the planet that ended up getting blown up in Phantasy Star 2. In the city of Parma, people note that the king seems to have changed of late. The king says he'll give you the ring in exchange for the treasure of Troy, but when you go dig it up and bring it back, he asks you to settle down permanently in the town. When you decline, he gets annoyed and turns into his true form, a giant menacing monster. You later find the real king imprisoned in another part of the castle. What struck me here was that people knew something was wrong, but no one acted on it. Instead, they ignored their instincts and let the false perpetrator maintain his rule. Only the hero could reveal the truth. But what if he'd never come? The various kings you meet throughout the game are neither totally good or totally evil, but are an interesting and eclectic bunch. In detail, you search the entire kingdom, but you can't find the king. The people inform you that he's a good king, but he has a thing for truffles. If you want to talk to him, you have to go to a faraway cave, track down some truffles, then find a random villager and offer the truffles to him. Only then does he reveal he is the actual king and gives you the win ring. In Swatham, all the people complain about their greedy king. One of the citizens tells you they can't get enough to eat thanks to his greed. One guy even points out our king doesn't want a queen because he thinks she'd spend his money. Even the soldiers are looking for other jobs because the king is so cheap. When you meet the king and ask him for the ring, he asks you for a favor. Go retrieve the precious white crystal, and then and only then will he consider giving you the ring. It's a long trek to the Ivory Cave, but once you defeat the dark demon inside, you obtain the treasure. I returned it hoping for the ring, but the king asked if I could get him another crystal, this time in the Ruby Cave against another monster. Even after obtaining the red crystal, the king requests one last crystal which is guarded by an even more difficult boss. Talk about greedy. At this point I was annoyed by the fetch quest, but even after getting the third, he only hands over the ring once you get irritated and flash your sword. But then, when you get to the next town, you learn the ring he gave you was a fake. Even though I was frustrated by this quest, it takes a tragic twist when I return to demand the real ring. Sarkhan had invaded and killed everyone there. The most messed up part is, you find the king barely alive, but the thing he seems most sad about having lost is his treasure. It was an unexpectedly dark narrative turn in the 16-bit era. One of the weirdest and most convoluted quests is in the city of Stowe, which has a fair and respected king, but someone stole one of his favorite magical books. He's too preoccupied to talk with you at first, but if you head out to a local cave, you find a young girl selling you what is arguably the best spell in the game. It can heal you at almost no MP, but when you return to the king, he accuses you of stealing his book and takes all your rings. You have to return to the young girl to prove your innocence, but she turns out to be a monster in disguise. After you defeat her, she apologizes, but when you return to Stowe, you find that she's wreaked havoc and stolen all your rings. You have to track her down again, defeat her, but when you return to the king, he asks you for another favor. Can you grab a doctor from the next town? But that doctor is too tired to make the trek back to Stowe, so you have to buy an alarm clock and wake him up. Finally, you help the people of Stowe make a full recovery. The quests in Sword of Vermilion are complicated, sometimes verging on the Kafkaesque, but that's also what I love about them. The developers could have made these quests really straightforward, but life's problems aren't that easily solved, and the hero's frustration was something that resonated so much with a younger me. There's a lot more variety, like in the town of Tadcaster, where everyone is afraid of you, begging you not to torment them any further. It turns out an imposter pretending to be you has taken over and taken the ring from the king. In the kingdom of Malaga, the king died, and now two ministers are fighting to take over by marrying the princess. But both seem a little bit odd, and it's up to you to figure out what's going on by passing the late king's test and retrieving a ring from his servant. One of the most interesting parts in the town is you find a restaurant that's packed because all the food there is free. Everyone is happy and trying to get as much to eat as possible. You eventually help Malaga solve its problems and rescue the princess from her quandary. In most games of this era, saving the princess is how the game ends. In Sword of Vermilion, this is just one chapter in a saga full of quests. Even more of a subversion of tropes is how you ultimately find the titular Sword of Vermilion. Usually the best weapon will require you to undergo some grand quest to prove your worth, but here, it's all about being subjected to what seems like obvious fraud. A salesman in Malaga will ask you to buy some overpriced items, then end up taking all your weapons and money. You can either reset or slog on, re-earning money to try and get better items. Later in the game, it actually turns out the merchant took your stuff in order to craft the Sword of Vermilion. He pretended to defraud you to throw off any of Sarkhan's spies, though weirdly, your sword isn't colored vermilion after this upgrade, leaving me a little confused about the game and sword's name. What stood out for me and made the journey so memorable was that the people you were saving actually had motivations of their own, even if they were often ridiculously selfish. But how can you blame them considering the world they live in? When you finally reach the town where you were born, Excalibria, it's still laying there in rubble. 18 years later, Sarkhan left it exactly as it was as a warning and testament to the danger he poses. By current standards, I know the overall story can't compare in complexity, but you have to realize that games like Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger were still 4 to 5 years away. Back in 1990, Sword of Vermilion felt vast and rich, adding a depth that I'd never seen in a console fantasy game. This also shows up at the end of the game. After you confront Sarkhan and defeat him, it turns out Sarkhan wasn't evil, he was consumed by evil. Both him and your dad tried to fight against that evil, but it ended up winning. Sarkhan is grateful you freed him and tells you someone is waiting for you back at Carthagena. The whole quest is really about leadership, patience, and sacrifice. By the end, the hero has finally become a king worthy to unite the people and, most importantly, to serve. I feel more mixed about the gameplay, and I think this is where the game gets most of its criticisms. First off, your character moves painfully slow. This is a game where having an option to speed movement up would have helped a lot. I actually like the battles. The battle system plays out on an overhead isometric view. As the reach of your sword isn't great, The key to fighting comes down to magic spells. Using magic to wipe out enemies feels very satisfying, especially spells like Aerios that fire aerial boomerangs. Each monster lets out a desperate scream when you take them down as they evaporate into smoke. There's a few different kinds of enemies, each coming in several variations. There's the slimes, the dog-like kobolds, skeletons of the undead, various sorcerers, Medusa-like snakemen, cyclops, and more. For the most part, they just move around and attack without any special AI, so it felt like the game had turned into an arcade romp, which I didn't mind. I'd actually say I like this game's combat more than the turn-based combat I was used to in so many other console RPGs. Again, back then, I'd never seen a game that combined these separate elements like Sword of Vermilion did. I can't even think of many that do it now. On the negative side, there's a lot of random battles. On top of that, the paths leading to the different villages are long and convoluted, and you'll be running into a whole lot of enemies. But there was something about that first-person view on the overworld and the dungeons that made it feel real. Like it was an actual interconnected land. At the same time, they're so lengthy. I actually almost never paid attention to the first-person camera and focused on the 2D map as it was easier to navigate that way. The dungeons also could have used more variety. Almost all of them are made of white columns so that they blend into each other. But it is nice that there's optional caves that hold treasures, so some exploration is rewarded. The hero never puts on his helmet except for the boss battles. These are played out in a side view, giving more detail to the giant enemies. Player movement is really stiff as you can only go left to right while ducking overhead attacks. You also can't use magic. The battles here are meant to be cinematic. Some can be difficult, but it's mostly about learning patterns and defeating these elite minions. Overall, the game isn't hard, and it's even easier if you have the excellent hint book that comes with it. Remember the good old days when manuals and hint books weren't part of a special edition, but just came with the game? Sword of Vermilion represented what I like so much about Genesis games of that time, trying to mix genres and experiment in ways that I really liked. It also had fantastic music which is playing throughout the video. The game could easily have fallen into the mold of many of its contemporary RPGs. The fact that it tried to do something different and had fun with the genre is why it remains one of my favorite games even now all these years later. Thanks as always for watching. It's always fun for me to go back to games I love and dive into why I like them so much. The game can be played on most of the Sega Genesis collections out there, so if you're interested, definitely give it a chance with the understanding that it has old school roots. There's a few other games I'd love to do, including Phantasy Star 3, so please stay tuned. Until then, see you all next time.